Mike Flanagan returns with another horror show on Netflix, but is The Midnight Club good? We're going to talk about it. What is up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to my channel. The Midnight Club is the brand new series from Mike Flanagan. We like to talk all Netflix originals, so if you guys want to subscribe for more reviews like this, be sure to hit that follow button or the like button if you enjoy the content. A group of terminally ill teenage patients resides at Brightcliffe Hospice, and together they create the Midnight Club. They meet in secret at midnight to tell horror stories. The group forms a pact that says whoever dies first would make an effort to contact the rest of the Midnight Club members from beyond the grave. So this is definitely a show where you're going to see death and you're going to get the scares, because that's what Mike Flanagan does. Like always, we're going to start with the rating. This is TV mature for language, violence, self-harm, and suicide. We're dealing with some deeper themes here. Even though it feels like a young adult television show, that's kind of the vibe that we're getting. A very different vibe from Flanagan's other television series we've seen on Netflix. And if you don't know them, The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor, one of the more underrated shows of, was it last year? At Midnight Mass. Loved Midnight Mass. I've loved everything he's done. Even his movies work really well for me, like A Gerald's Game or Doctor Sleep. In this series, it makes sure to distinguish itself from those projects, coming across as something geared more towards families as opposed to just the pure horror that we're normally getting from Flanagan. Yeah, the scares are definitely in here. I think it just set a Guinness Book of World record for the most jump scares in a single episode of television. So it's not like you're lacking those scares, but it does encompass, I think, a more broad audience than what we've seen before. But in terms of the story, this is where I was interested the most, right? We start out with this young girl played by Iman Benson, and you get that relationship with her father, and the story is genuinely sweet at first until everything starts to take a turn when she gets this horrible news. And the news is so dreadful, she has to set out on a path focusing on recovery and putting everything else to the side, right? She's not able to pursue her dreams, go to college, do the things that she wanted to do because she doesn't really know how much time she has left on this earth. So everything went from happy and it's kind of a coming of age story, a young adult story, and then we got hit pretty hard in the first episode. And I thought the performance from Iman, that's something that has to work if we're going to feel the way that we're supposed to feel about that character. And I thought she nailed it. And while the story wasn't fully capturing me, I'm like, okay, this is taking a bit to get there. But once we actually get to this crazy place that she found through research, doesn't entirely know what it is, but she knows the fight that she's fighting has to be fought a different way. And that's kind of what they preach at this place that she goes to, less focused on the chemo and the recovery that she's been used to over this entire time, because we span a pretty long time in the first episode. She goes from being somewhat healthy to really sick. She wants to try something new. Her dad is able to trust her to try something new. So she goes to this place that is focused on a different kind of recovery. But in this place, there are other kids going through very similar things, and thus you're going to have a sad story in itself because not every character is going to make it. And we see that in the second episode. This is going to be a show filled with sadness, emotions, death, dread, but there's something else going on here, because that's when we're introduced to the Midnight Club. And the Midnight Club is this group of kids, and they form this group to where they gather around a table and tell these stories. Now, there is a point to these stories. There is a point to telling these stories. That's something that we discover as we watch. But the first half of the season is all about the stories that they are telling. Whether or not they come into play into the actual overarching story that we are watching, that's something that you all have to find out. But the framing device for everything that's happening within these stories, I think, is just as interesting as the stories being told. Because obviously, each of these kids, they have something that they're going through. In a sense, you could say they are there because they are dying. And because of that, you're going to get the dreadful scenes outside of the stories that they are telling. But what they are telling, that was impressive in itself. And that's where a lot of the scares come from. In a way, this is an anthology series. Not what I expected. It's based on a novel, apparently. And Flanagan taking that and adapting it into a series like this, you could look at it as, well, it's just going to be another CW show, because you got the young kids and you got they're talking about their feelings and such. That's not what I want in a scary story, is it? I mean, yeah, that's what they're doing on its surface, but it's Mike Flanagan we're talking about, so each story is going to be handled so effectively, and this, out of everything that I've seen in the last week, and I've watched Hellraiser and Terrifier 2, and I loved Terrifier 2, maybe even more than this, but this got me in the Halloween spirit more than anything that I've watched because of how effective the storytelling is. We're talking storytelling and structure. That's what Flanagan is the best at, in my opinion. So the fact that they're gathered around telling these stories, yeah, they're going to do it in an effective way, but when we cut to those stories and we're able to see what's representing the words that are coming out of their mouths, that was really cool, right? It may not be as easy to get attached to this as some of Flanagan's other projects on Netflix. So in that way, I was a tiny bit disappointed. I cared about the kids, but I really cared about our main character because we're with her from the beginning. She's discovering the secrets that this place has to hold. I mean, just in the first episode, they're telling her, don't go down the elevator. You don't want to go down the elevator. You don't want to do this or that. There could be spirits in this house. And then the questions are posed. Well, do you actually believe people are reaching out to us from the other side? Do we believe these stories are real? And that is a question that comes heavily into play into the second half of the show because we start focusing less on the anthology side of things, and there is a mystery at play with these kids with the Midnight Club. So that was really cool. My thing about this show personally, it all comes down to what genre do you like the most. Obviously, it's focusing on the horror side of things, but this is in itself like a coming-of-age type of story, but it's also structured in a way that was effective, but not necessarily in a way that's going to get you as invested as maybe you want to, especially after that first episode, because when the first episode was over, I'm like, okay, we're back on track, Mike Flanagan, here we go. But you start to figure out what it actually is. I was a little disappointed in that way. Maybe that's my expectations talking. Not every character gets their due. We're focused on a few of them, but others are kind of relegated to the background, and they couldn't get that attachment from me. So when something happens to someone, I'm either really attached and emotional, or I'm just like, well, you know, stuff's going to happen. Also, we're telling a lot of stories here, and not every story is going to work. Not everyone's going to be effective. I didn't love all of them, so that means certain episodes are not even going to come close to the heights of others, and that creates for inconsistency throughout this series, which also makes it a bit more difficult to binge than maybe some of his other shows. And I hate to keep making those comparisons because Flanagan's a beast, and he can't always be at the top of his game. I think what he was able to do with balancing this, and then the filmmaking in general, right? The atmosphere is effective. You have that look, that vibe that you want in a show like this, and it just feels way more dramatic than some of these other shows. I mentioned CW. Just get that out of your heads right now. This ain't a CW show. It's obviously a lot better than that, but the inconsistency, I do think, hurt him, and the story itself just wasn't as compelling as maybe I thought it would be after episode 1. My final point is that this has a surprising level of emotion to it, especially as you get to the final few episodes. I thought this would be a limited series. Looks like there may be a season on the horizon, a season 2, so that's interesting. And comparing it to other shows in the YA genre, which is a YA show at its core, it's definitely better than that, but I think some will go in with loftier expectations and scarier expectations. Great atmosphere, great thrills, but it may not be as scary. You know, it said there were a lot of jump scares in that episode, and that is the case, but I personally didn't find it to be as scary, or nearly as scary, as some of these other Flanagan series. So before I give you guys my score, let me know your thoughts down below. Are you watching this show? What's your favorite Flanagan series so far? And if you enjoyed this review, let me know down below by dropping that like. There are some inconsistencies within the anthology structure of this series, but Flanagan still manages to bring the best out of it. The atmosphere and sense of hopelessness is effective, and our main character is compelling. I'm still going a 78% here. I really enjoyed my time. And the fact that this is a show coming out right around Halloween is going to work extremely well for some people. May not be the best binge in the world, but this is definitely one you want to watch. And who knows, maybe season 2 is coming sooner than we think. Flanagan, you're a beast. We love what you do. Thank you guys again for watching. I'll see you soon.